One of the top questions that I get from people that DM me when they find out I'm a loan officer or right here on YouTube is, how do I pass the NMLS test? Well, today I am going to give you all the answers that your heart desires. I just finished up doing my continuing education, which is required if you are a licensed loan officer. You have to go through 8 hours of continuing education every single year. And coming off of that, it gave me an opportunity to do some research and figure out, well, what exactly is on this test. So today, we're going to dissect why is it that people do not pass the test, how to pass the test, and what is on the test. I saw an interesting statistic that said only about 56% of the people that take the NMLS safe test pass on the first time. Contrast that with the people that pass the bar on the first time. The number of people that pass the bar on the first time is 75%. So if you know what I know, you better get the studying. It's a lot of information, and so I got some sticky notes here where I've been able to jot down some notes to make sure I don't leave out anything. But number one, why do people fail this test? One big reason why people fail this test is because they don't know how to take a test. Now, I have been a teacher in the past, and as a teacher, I've learned how to write test questions, and that's a huge part of it. So I'll bring that up as I see fit while I'm going through what is on the test. Another thing is that people are just not taking it seriously, and you're not spending enough time when it comes to preparing. I would honestly, seriously suggest that you spend about 30 hours of studying, an hour a day, studying, reading, highlighting, underlining, memorizing. It is that serious, because I'm telling you, what you don't want is to fail the test, because if you fail the test, you have to wait another 30 days to take the test again. Then if you fail, you have to wait, I think, 90 days, up to 180 days before you could take it a third time. So it's literally, time is money. You don't want to fail this test. This test is the difference between you and tens of thousands of dollars. So take the time to study. Another thing is that when you start to think about the way that this test is made up, it's difficult for a reason. It is in compliance with what the SAFE Act says that the test needs to be. It has to be rigorous. The hurdle is high because they don't want people out here causing the same problems that we had that got us into 2008. So think about the concepts that I'm going to go over, and think about how these concepts apply to mortgage as you are studying, because if you don't grasp concepts and how to implement those concepts in the practical day-to-day inner workings of running a mortgage company or being a mortgage loan officer, you are going to struggle. Now, I did pass the test the first time. I do want to go on the record to say that, but I also studied like my life depended on it, because the fact of the matter is my life did depend on it. So the test is made up of 5 parts, and it is a written test, 125 questions. You have to get at least a 75% to pass. Now that 75%, some of those questions are, if I remember correctly, 115 questions are scored. 10 questions are just tester questions. Again, just like how the SAT does and other tests. That's how tests are typically made. You don't know which test questions are scored or which ones are not, so you need to answer every single question as best you can. All right, so buckle up. Here we go. So what is the test made out of? It's 5 parts. You have the federal laws, which is 23% of the test. You have general mortgage, which is another 23% of the test. MLO activities, which is 25% of the test. You have ethics, which is 16% of the test. And then you have the uniform state content, which is about 13% of the test. Okay, so Joy, what is on the first part? What does that mean? Federal laws. Okay, this is what I say. Federal laws are things I don't know the laws that well in real life. I know enough to answer some questions. I try to stay out of the way of doing things that I think could get me into trouble. And I'm just explaining how this translates in the real world, how this is applied practically. The reality of it is, at these companies, you have people that take care of all of these things, these different departments. Compliance takes care of all of the things to make sure all of the regulations and all of that is being adhered to. So what you need to know, and this isn't everything, I will leave a link below with a really amazing outline to help you study. So RESPA, ECOA, TILA, which is also known as Reg Z. So I want to talk about that. When you're taking the test, you need to not only know what the law is, but what is the letter. So you might have Reg X, Reg O, Reg P. There are multiple ones. You need to know the names of them, the letters, because throughout the course of the test, it may decide to call it something else, but you still need to know what they are referencing when they're talking about it. HMDA, which is something I talk about every day, is the Mortgage Disclosure Act, which basically says, hey, I need you to tell me your race and ethnicity. People they avoid answering that question a lot of times when I ask them, but the reality is that's one of the laws that you want to be able to explain to people why it's important that they provide you certain information. Another thing that will trip you up on the test is a lot of these things sound very similar. For example, FACTA and FCRA. That's very easy to get very confused. They're kind of about the same thing. You need to be able not only to know what the differences are, but make sure that when you're reading it and you're trying to go through, because it's a computer-based test, you're not going to be writing down anything. When you're scrolling through and your eyes start to glaze over, you want to make sure that you are very alert and that you're sure that you're seeing what you think you're seeing to be able to answer those questions. A lot of times on the test, little things like that will trip you up, because we do have things in mortgage that we have multiple names for things. I think I heard something, there are over 100 different ways to call mortgage origination fees. You might have lender fees, underwriting fees, processing fees. You can call it so many different things. And so we're trying to unify and make things more uniform. However, again, on the test, just be mindful. You need to know different names of things and what they could be called, because some things are very similar. Another example is a high cost mortgage versus a higher price mortgage loan. You should know the differences between those, because again, even though they sound very similar, they function a little bit differently. What else should you know? The FTC, money laundering. Who is the CFPB? What do they do? Why do they exist? Who created it? All of that is very, very, very important. And again, this isn't everything on part one, but it is a good amount of information to get you started. Part two is the general mortgage. So general mortgage things are like loan types, loan products. What is a traditional loan? And I'll go ahead, spoiler alert, there's only one loan that's considered a traditional loan. It is a 30-year fix. Nothing else, everything else is considered non-traditional. 15 years, ARMs, all of that. Then you want to go even deeper. What is a QM loan versus a non-QM loan? All of that is a part of this section of the test. An equity line of credit, which is known as a HELOC, a reverse mortgage. How old does somebody have to be to get a reverse mortgage? What happens if they die? Can they vacate the property? After how many days if they vacate the property? Does it have to go back to the bank or be sold? All of those things in terms of the who, the what, the how, waiting periods. Those are things that you have to know about everything that I'm talking about today, because those are the areas that will indeed trip you up. Just all types of different loan terms and loan jargon like mortgage points, DTI, LTV, all of those things are going to be on the second part of the test. So part 3 of the test, mortgage loan officer activities, the MLO activities. What loan officers do from day to day? Who does what? Who's in the process? Who helps with the application when it leaves you? How do you communicate with the borrower? Timelines. If you do a loan application, what are the 6 pieces of that conversation that make it a loan application where you have to send out specific documents? What are those specific documents in the initial disclosures? How fast does the person have to get those initial disclosures for you to still be compliant based upon the laws in RESPA? You have to understand all of these things. And again, going back to what I said before, I ain't even gonna hold you. I don't know half the time. I'm just being very honest. I have a general grasp, but the reality of it is you don't need to know somebody else's job. You need to know your job, because all of these things, if I take a loan application from you and I get the 6 pieces of information, I'm going to get a little alert. It's going to automatically pop up on the computer and say, hey, you need to send these disclosures out in 3 days. Great. I'll ignore it. Oh, hey, you got 2 more days. Still ignore it. Hey, you need to send this out by 3 o'clock. Ooh. If you don't get to it, somebody in your company will likely get to it for you. Every company runs a little differently. Normally, I do send out my disclosures right away because I know that I have an actual contract. But I'm just making the point that when it comes to things like waiting periods and things with compliance, your company is not going to put themselves in a position to be fined or get their hands smacked. So I assure you, someone will tap you on the shoulder to let you know that you are not compliant. But timelines, like how quickly does something have to go out? How long do you have to wait if something doesn't go out? What documents can be waived? What can't be waived? All of that goes under the umbrella of what I'm talking about right now. Another thing is like what's on the loan application. Fun fact, internally we call loan applications different things. It can be called an URLA, which is a Uniform Residential Loan Application, or it can be called a 1003 or 1003 jargon. Okay, regardless, if it shows up on the test and they're calling it an URLA, you should know what it is. If it shows up on the test and they're calling it a 1003, you should know what that is. The 6 pieces that I mentioned earlier, what's in the loan disclosures, like I said, and the closing disclosures at the end. That's another big one. So there are different pieces of information that has to go out every single time you do a home loan. And it's important to be able to answer the questions of the borrowers when they have them. So that's why they're asking you some of these things up front. The overall concept that you need to grasp is all this information is Googleable. You just need to know what is it and what is the purpose of it. Generally speaking, when you're reading these test questions, I would strongly suggest put yourself in the borrower's shoes and understand that a lot of this was born out of the idea that people were taking advantage of. So think through the question that they're asking you and say, okay, well, if I was a borrower, how would I best be protected by this, right? Oh, it's a 3-day waiting period. 3 days should be long enough for me to read through 50 pages of information and feel comfortable with moving forward before I give you my credit card number and you swipe my card to get an appraisal, right? That sounds reasonable. Think like a consumer with a lot of these, and that will help guide you close to the right answer. A lot of times what they'll do is they'll put very similar answers. So it might trip you up a little bit. For example, oh, okay, when can you drop mortgage insurance? Well, they might say something like 18%, 20%, 22%, and never, right? Well, fun fact, 3 of those answers are actually correct, but depending upon how the question is worded and what loan product they're talking about, the answer is going to be different. So read very carefully, very, very carefully. Don't go too fast. Slow and steady wins the race. What else is on here? Underwriting. Okay, so when it leaves you and you've done all your disclosures with the borrower, it gets to underwriting. There are things that they want to know about, like the ability to repay, the 4 C's, what happens in closing, the number of days that the borrower has in the rescission period to change their mind in case they decided that they don't want a loan after they done wasted 60 days of your life. And it does happen. The closing disclosure, all of that is a part of what they're going to question you about. So get familiar with the documents. It will even go as far to say on page 3, or what page is such and such located on. So you have to study that document in order to be able to answer those questions. The big thing that people think about mortgage loan officers is, oh my God, you got to know a lot of math. No, you don't have to know a lot of math, but there are some financial calculations that you do have to be privy to or be able to execute relatively quickly. And I will tell you that is a part of this section of the test. So things that you might want to know is how to calculate mortgage insurance premium. Or upfront mortgage insurance premium. You might need to calculate DTI. You might need to calculate the LTV, which is another thing. I remember a question that I had when I took the test. And like I said, I came from teaching, so I didn't know anything about any of this. I remember a question I got tripped up on. It was about equity. And they later asked a question a different way, and it was about LTV. The questions were opposite of one another, but one helped the other, if that makes sense. So how much equity do you need in your property to drop the mortgage insurance, or what does the LTV need to be on the property to drop mortgage insurance? It's asking the same thing. It's just flip-flopped around a little bit. So be very, very, very careful about letting little things like that trip you up, because it will mess up your calculations. How to calculate discount points, or with adjustable rate loans, definitely. They'll want to know what is the rate going to adjust to in 5 years. And you should be able to take a look at it and see what is the maximum amount of interest rate can go up to when it's time for it to adjust on the initial period, and what is it going to adjust to as a maximum adjustment for the life of the loan. But in order to do that, you have to know, how do you read the ARM? So be careful about that. What is the index that's being used? Back in the day, we used to use LIBOR. They don't have that anymore. I'm positive, I'm almost guarantee that's probably going to be a choice on the questions. I mean, a choice for one of the answers that you can select for the question. LIBOR is not what we use any longer. So hopefully that information was helpful to you. All right, so the next part is about ethics. Y'all, we don't have none. I ain't gonna hold you up. Honestly, ethics is something that loan officers sometimes can struggle with. And the reason why I say it slightly jokingly is because when you're talking to customers, they hate you, and you don't even know why they hate you. They don't like you. They think that you are out to get them. They think that you're giving them a high rate on purpose because you're going to make all this money and yield spread and things that don't even exist anymore. But ethics is something that is a part of the loan process. However, in this case, we're not only going to be questioned about ethics as an industry, but other things as well. So what do you do in the event that you suspect somebody's committing fraud? That is one of my fan favorites. I'm gonna tell you, I have people all the time come to me and they'll ask questions and do a little bit of social engineering where they will, and actually that's something that you might be questioned about. What is social engineering? Well, they will get a little bit of information from another loan officer, get a little information from a realtor, put it all together, and then ask me something. But I can see straight through that, baby. If you hint that you think you want your property be an investment property, that's what it's gonna be. Period. I'm not losing my job and my license because you want to commit occupancy fraud and somebody might think I helped you with it. Absolutely not. So you need to understand, what do you do when you are faced with that? There are protocols that are in place. Another thing I could tell you, this is kind of a funny story because it was about a year ago. I had a guy gave me a pay stub, and you can always tell when something isn't right because sometimes people will be a little bit too excited to get a loan. Like, they know they're doing something wrong because they'll call you back to back. Did you approve me yet? Can I get the approval? Oh, did you check my credit report yet? Something about it will give you a gut feeling and let you know somebody lying. Something in the milk is not clean. I had a guy last year gave me a fake pay stub. It was dated December 2022, and I was like, but you can't say anything to them. So all of that is a part of what you're being tested on, why things are written the way that they are, because you can't accuse somebody of committing mortgage fraud. You need to escalate it to the appropriate people internally to get that taken care of. Another thing is, how do you advertise? One big thing that I will say, and I know I'm going a little bit off of a tangent, but this is important. One big thing that I will say is that when it comes to advertising, you will hear me say a couple things. One, when I'm talking about interest rates, I say something super blanket, and I will start the phrase off with something like, let's just pretend. This is not true. I'm completely making this up, because you might slip and say something and somebody say, well, you told me. No, I didn't. I did not. So things like that. How do you advertise? What information has to be disclosed in the advertisement? When can you not say or do certain things? That sort of thing. So ethics, because you don't want to be caught in a situation where you're being accused of baiting and switching people. Having financial responsibility. Do you pay your bills on time? Some states, they'll check your credit. Like North Carolina, check your credit annually. I think you have to have like a minimum 620 FICO score, if I'm not mistaken, from TransUnion. That may have changed, but that's a part of that. Like, they will make sure you're not filing bankruptcy. I personally, and I mean, I know my opinion doesn't matter because nobody pays me to think, but I don't really think that one necessarily means that you're not going to be good at your job. However, I think that they take that as, hey, you might do some funny things for a piece of change with other people's information if your finances are not in order. So also background checks, things like that. What all do you have to do to be able to be a loan officer? Who do you tell when you're moving? That's a big thing. I remember one time I had moved from one apartment into a townhome. Got my little feelings hurt when I went to log into the system. I completely forgot to tell the NMLS that I had moved, and they blocked me from being able to take loan applications until we got that resolved. So little things like that, where, like I said, you would think that it's just for a test, but they take these rules and laws and regulations very seriously. Okay, last but not least, uniform state content. Basic stuff, NMLS identifiers, who gives it to you, why you gotta have it, continuing education, how do you get to keep your license active, who can suspend your license or revoke your license, who can take you to court if you need to be taken to court for something, who can give you a fine, how much your fines might be for certain things that you might do. I've known people in the past that have gotten into a little bit of trouble, not big trouble, and sometimes it's just at the discretion of whomever, whatever the company is, as to how they want to take an offense. However, just be mindful. You always want to be above board in everything that you do. You want to carry yourself with a lot of ethics and morals, and I'm telling you, I pride myself on the integrity that I have. That is one of the biggest things that I will tell people, the very first thing that I will tell people, I'm not playing with my livelihood for no little $3,000-$4,000 commission from you. It just absolutely not. I'm not your girl. Which is also why I will say certain things to people about, hey, I'll take your loan application because I have to, because again, by law, you can't tell somebody that they can't apply for a loan. But you learn how to gently educate someone so that they know the way that they should move moving forward, if that makes sense. But I try to educate people as best I can and say, hey, ethically, try and give them information. If I know that somebody is in a bad situation, now might not be the time for them to buy a house. However, if they want to buy a house, guess what? I will take the application because it's my job. I'm duty bound, and that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to keep my mortgage license. Yes, I am. A couple other little things on here. Well, I did mention like penalties that you may have. Who needs a mortgage license? And I'm going to end it with that part. So who needs a mortgage license, y'all? People should not be quoting interest rates. And one of the biggest pet peeves that I have right now, and again, it's my last tangent, but one of the biggest pet peeves that I have right now is realtors going out here telling people interest rates. The other week, somebody was talking about how interest rates had dropped and all of this, that, and the third. Realtors are not loan officers, and loan officers are not realtors. I'm not out here talking about price per square foot, so I need them to not be talking about interest rates. It causes chaos. You are supposed to have a mortgage license to be able to disclose interest rates to anybody. I remember when I was a junior loan officer, when I first got started in the business, and I was able to get certain information to kind of pre-screen the person. I couldn't take a loan application though. I couldn't give them any like quotes on interest rates or anything like that. It was very, very limited as to what I could do. And once they started getting into talking about loan products and things like that, I had to say, hang on a second, and transfer it to someone that was a licensed loan officer. So I say that to say, I think I'm about 20 minutes into this video, maybe a little bit more. Y'all, this is a very robust test. And it is one that needs to be taken very, very, very seriously. I will have a link at the bottom that will, like I said, provide a really nice outline for you. I'm happy to answer your questions. If you have questions, and this, you find that there's going to be a lot of views. Hopefully it'll be a lot of views since some of my past loan officer videos have been. Y'all get in the comments and talk to each other. Throw out questions. Tell us, what was your experience? Did you pass the test on the first time? And don't lie. If 100% of people are like, yeah, I passed on the first time, all y'all lying. I'm telling you, this test is harder than passing the bar. So you need to study. You need to look for things that are absolutes, like all of these. This is always true when XYZ, or this is never true when ABC. Another thing is like words that kind of play, like, all of the following statements are true except. That's a really, really big one that they like to use a lot. All of those things, that's how I used to trip up my kids when we used to write questions for the standardized tests within the school anyway. The mock test that we used to put together. So you guys, please, please, please study very hard. Look at similarities and differences between different loan products. Look at similarities and differences between different regulations. Find little mnemonic devices that are going to help you with that. I don't know why, but for some reason there was a law about privacy. And I remember the name of the law, it was a funny name to me. And so I always had this thing in my mind where it was like, oh gosh, I would want to keep that private too. I don't know. I just totally made up this story in my mind about these people's names. But it worked. So that one question that you can make that funny little mnemonic device about could be the question that gets you either a pass or a fail. So, guys, I hope this information was helpful. If so, give me a thumbs up. Subscribe, please. And I look forward to chatting with you guys again. And good luck on passing your NMLS safe test the first try. If you don't get the first try, keep trying. You will pass. Have a good day.